So say your mom fell, broke her hip, went to the hospital, had surgery, then would typically go from the hospital to rehab from there. And then she would do rehab maybe a couple of weeks, maybe longer, just depending. It all depends on if they are really doing the work to get better. If someone stops doing the work, they just don't want to participate, then Medicare will stop paying, and then there's no more physical therapy. Welcome to Aging in Style, the podcast dedicated to celebrating aging and what it takes to do it well. I'm Lori Williams. I'm a certified senior advisor and senior housing expert. In each episode, you'll learn stories of older adults who are thriving in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and in some cases in their hundreds. Whether you're an older adult or the child of an older adult, this podcast is filled with insightful resources, organizations that are doing incredible work, and stories that will inspire you to volunteer, learn, and who knows, maybe even skydive in your golden years. Hi, welcome to today's episode of Aging in Style. We are back with questions from our listeners, which I'm loving this segment because we are getting some great questions from everyone, and I'm glad to be able to answer them. And we have Anna, my producer, back, and she will be introducing the questions, and then I will be giving you the answers. So thank you, Anna.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to ask this week's question, and it is, my mom is very weak and physical therapy was suggested. Do we need to go to rehab?
That is a great question. So physical therapy is often suggested for people if they are fall risk, if they've been, sick and have become weak. So there's a couple of things to think about first. So if she is currently, I'm just going to answer how this question sounds. It sounds like she is at her home, but we're concerned because she seems to be getting weaker, maybe shuffling a little bit, not picking her feet up, which those are concerns for falls. So physical therapy would definitely benefit her. But in this case, it doesn't sound like she would have to go to rehab. What you would do is take her to her primary care physician and explain what's happening and see if you can get a doctor's order for physical therapy, which would be through home health. And they will come to her home to do the therapy there. And her home, what that means is it could be maybe she's living with you, maybe she's in her own home, maybe she's in independent living or assisted living, wherever she is, they can come to her and do the therapy. And Medicare will cover that. Depends on how it's ordered. I mean, she may get 20 visits, could be more, could be less. It depends on her Medicare, if she has regular Medicare or Advantage plan. So there's just different factors that come into play there. If someone falls, and I'll just kind of take it through why it would be rehab. So say your mom fell, broke her hip, went to the hospital, had surgery, then would typically go from the hospital to rehab from there. And then she would do rehab maybe a couple of weeks, maybe longer, just depending. It all depends on if they are really doing the work to get better. If someone stops doing the work, they just don't want to participate, then Medicare will stop paying, and then there's no more physical therapy. So say in this instance, your mom, like I said, had broken her hip, had surgery, went to rehab, she worked really hard, then came home, then you would want to continue physical therapy coming to your house. And again, that's through home health and through an order from the physician. Does that answer the question, Anna?
I think so. That person, that's as far as they went to explaining it. So, okay, that's good to know that there's options. That's good.
I mean, there's options out there. So, I mean, just the way that question is worded, it sounds like mom is at home, nothing has happened, she hasn't had a fall or anything, but maybe she was sick, maybe she had the flu. And when you're older and get sick with something like that, it can kind of knock everything out of you. So it takes a little bit to kind of get your strength back. Or like I mentioned an example, maybe she's doing the foot shuffle thing and we're afraid of her falling. So doing the physical therapy and working on core strength and working on best ways to stand up and making sure there's no fall risk in the house. We don't have rugs there where she's shuffling and she's going to fall when she hits the rug area. So when we've done several episodes about safety in the home, which I think is so, so important. You know, I go into some seniors' homes and I can see the fall risk right off. And we, you know, that's what
the beautiful
we don't
rug,
want.
the magazine dropped in the middle of the room. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I've, you know, said my own mother, love you, Mom, if you're listening. But, you know, she's 83 and I'm at her house and she's up on a ladder getting something from a top cabinet and she has throw rugs everywhere. So all those things that I'm like, don't do this. But, you know,
You're like, red flag.
I know.
I have to ask, you touched on something and I was like, oh, I'm curious. Is there a minimum of time that they'll prescribe it or a maximum amount of time they'll prescribe physical therapy?
Again, it depends on insurance. It depends on if the person is going to do the work. You know, if PT comes and they're like, oh, I'm so tired today, or, you know, they're not giving it. They're not really participating. And, you know, it just depends on what the PT is ordered for. So there's a lot of variables there.
Okay. That's good to know.
Okay. I hope that answers the question. And we, like I said earlier, are loving all these questions coming in. So if you have a question, you can send them to me through the website. So my website is LoriWilliams-seniorservices.com. And we have a section there, ask your question. Just fill that out and it will come right to me. And you never know, you might be featured here on the podcast with your questions. So keep those questions coming. And thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. Be sure to share it with your friends and family. And we will talk to you next week.